Mr. Bob's Railroad Workbench, where we talk about math, science, history, and trains, and do it all with some very fun activities. Hi, I'm Mr. Bob Letchenberger, Education Director for the National Railroad Museum. If you're watching us on Facebook Live and want to type in a question, feel free to do so after today, or we'll answer right after today's segment. If you would like to just type in and let us know who you are and where you're watching from, we'd love to hear from you, and make sure that you like the National Railroad Museum's Facebook page. Today we are talking about America's Sleepheart. Yes, we're talking about the mascot for the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad. Starting back in 1932, the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad was looking for a new advertising mascot, and it turned out that a Sunday magazine in a New York newspaper led them to the answer. Now, the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway, running from Virginia into Ohio, had a number of very famous trains. The fast-flying Virginian, the Sportsman, and their number one train, the George Washington, that you see here in an early advertising piece of artwork. But by 1932, the advertising slogan that they were using, "Sleep at the top," well, it just didn't seem to fit the quality of their trains any longer. So Vice President for Passenger Traffic, Lionel Probert, was looking for an alternative. And as he was reading his Sunday paper and came across the magazine section, he found an etching of a kitten. The etching was done by Austrian artist Guido Grunwald, and it had been transferred to a gallery in New York City for an exhibit. Probert thought that the phrase "sleep like a kitten" would probably be more appropriate for the Chesapeake and Ohio's trains. So for all of $5, he picked up this etching and had his ad agency turn it into a new advertisement for the railroad. Chessie came into being in 1932. You see here an ad featuring her in the "Sleep Like a Kitten" slogan from 1934. To say that Chessie was an instant success is kind of an understatement. The railroad and their advertising agency were deluged with letters praising Chessie, wondering how they could get reprints of the ad, wondering if they were actually going to meet Chessie on one of the C&O's trains. Well, to play off of Chessie's popularity, a couple years later, 1935, Chessie had kittens. You see her here with Nip and Tuck, who were actually just smaller reproductions of the original etching. They appeared in a number of ads continuing to promote those Chesapeake and Ohio Railway trains, and they were just as popular as Mom had turned out to be originally. However, scandal erupted. Think about the times and the moral standards of the 1930s. We see Mom, we see her kids, but where's Dad? There needs to be a dad in this picture. And again, the railroad and its ad agency received hundreds and thousands of letters asking where was Dad. The public wanted to know. In response, in 1937, the Chesapeake and Ohio introduced Peak. Get it? Chesapeake. Peak turned out to be Chessie's old man, as they say in the advertisement, and the mystery was solved. Yes, Nip and Tuck did have a loving, supporting father in Peak. Well, the entire family continued to promote the trains of the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway, and of course, moving into the 1940s, our country is World War II, and Chessie and Peak and Nip and Tuck do their part for the war effort. Chessie, whenever she would travel, would sleep in a Pullman car and travel in lower berth number 9. Cats have 9 lives, and Chessie always stayed in lower 9 when she traveled on the C&O. Well, during World War II, Chessie willingly gave up berth lower 9 and actually slept under it, as you see here from the 1943 C&O calendar, so that some young man in military service could have the comfort of that bunk while he was traveling to or from his duty. Of course, did his part as well. He went off and enlisted into the Army. And while he was away, as you see here on the 1945 C&O calendar, Chessie, of course, dreamed that, one, he was safe, but two, that he was being brave and gallant on the battlefield. And yes, well, he was injured during World War II, but he also was decorated for his bravery. Of course, when the war was over, the family reunited, Dad coming home from the war, and they continued to promote the fine trains of the Chesapeake and Ohio through the late 40s into the 50s. Well, a number of years later, when we get to the end of the 1960s into the early 1970s, the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway merged with the Baltimore and Ohio and the Western Maryland. And this new company named itself the Chessie system, yes, in honor of that famous cat. And as you see here, their color scheme on their locomotives, well, bright and very colorful, but also had a modernized version of Chessie cat right there on the nose. So, a little bit about Chessie and her role in American railroad history. If you would like to read a little bit more about Chessie, I would recommend you find the book Chessie, America's Railroad Kitten by Thomas Dixon. Look it up online. You can probably find this at your local library. Also, if you go on to the National website, nationalrrmuseum.org, click on the Education tab, scroll down to the Activity Zone, and then look for the segments from Mr. Bob's Railroad Workbench. I have an activity there for you that you can download and do at home. One of the most beautiful things along the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway were always the spring flowers. And the activity I have for you is making your own Chessie spring flowers. A little bit about America's Sleepheart, Chessie cat from the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway. The National Railroad Museum, well, we inspire lifelong learning by providing dynamic educational opportunities through the preservation of railroad objects, engaging exhibits, and innovative programs. As a nonprofit institution, we are supported by both public and private donations and, of course, assistance from our museum members. If you would like more information on how to support the National Railroad Museum or become a museum member, visit our website, nationalrrmuseum.org. And as always, thank you so very much for your continued support. Hey, I'm Mr. Bob. Thanks for stopping by Mr. Bob's Railroad Workbench today, and we hope to see you here again real soon.